So I am Alison Whittle. I am the Post-16 Technical Advisor at City and Guilds. I am joined on the webinar by my colleague Kerry Dunkley, who is a Senior Business Manager at City and Guilds. But unfortunately, it doesn't look as if the sound is working so far with that. So as normal, we'll go through, it seems a bit silly now to go through the platform guidelines when obviously we understand that there are some problems. So we are delivering it from home and in separate locations. So thank you so much for bearing with us about the technical hitches. So I'm going to talk to the most of the slides through this webinar. If we get cut off or we do anything happens, I'm going to end the webinar and record it. So at least you will have a full recording of it. But the main purpose of this webinar is to provide some detailed information for providers who are thinking of delivering T-levels and would like to know some background information, as well as providing information on what are the next steps to take if you are planning to deliver T-levels. Now, there is a huge amount of information that's already been shared, as you're probably aware. However, in some sectors, T-levels are now in their third year of delivery. So some of the earlier information that was shared may not have been relevant to you as providers at that time. So the main point today is going to be a little bit of background information to T-levels. In other words, what is the actual aim of T-levels? Why have they been developed? Kerry was going to talk about City and Guilds as an organisation. She may still come in as a guest. And then we're going to have a look at the post-16 reforms and the impact for providers. What will the future look like? You know, what qualifications are going to be available to you? And also the post-16 choices. How do T-levels actually compare to other qualifications? And what sectors and routes are City and Guilds T-levels available in, and what's our offer? Some of you will already know very well what a T-level looks like. What is a T-level? But we're going to run through the bones of that again. How T-levels are funded, how to apply for funding, who can apply, how do you apply, and when do you apply? Looking at working with City and Guilds, the timelines for you, and then the wealth of support and resources that are all fee-free to you, how you can access them, and also the other supporting organisations that we work with. But I think it's really helpful to do responsible for who fits into your organisation and how do they fit in, what is their different roles within T-levels, and then finally the next steps. So I'm not going to read this slide out, it's there on the screen for you, but what I would like to do is explain how T-levels first came about and what the intention was. So where did the idea first come from? Well, back in 2015, I think it was now, an independent panel on technical education was established, and this was chaired by Lord David Sainsbury, and he was tasked with advising the government on the actions to improve the quality of technical and vocational education in England, as there were serious problems with the existing system. Now, in particular, it was highlighted that it's over complex. It failed to provide the skills needed for the 21st century. And by 2020, the UK was set to fall to 28 out of 33 OECD countries, and that's the countries that are part of the Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development. So that's how they came about. Then in 2016, Lord Sainsbury published his report, and he called it the Post-16 Skills Plan. Now it's just referred to as the Skills Plan. And this confirmed that the governments were acceptance of all of the panel's 34 recommendations, outlining a radical reform of post-16 education, which will transform the technical education landscape. Now, the aim is to streamline the current system by addressing the problem of the confusing choice of qualifications for young people, and ensuring that there is a clear line of sight between the qualification and their intended job role. And I think it was back in September 2015, I think there was over 21,000 qualifications alone on Ofqual's register of regulated qualifications. And these were offered by over 158 different awarding organisations. So rather than providing choice, it led to confusion and complexity within the system. So as part of these reforms, the government is going to remove funding approval for qualifications that overlap with T levels to 16 to 19-year-olds, which will reduce complexity for learners, parents, and employers. Now, one of the main features of a T level is the involvement and collaboration of employers and businesses in the development to ensure that the content of the T level equips learners with the skills and knowledge that these businesses and employers want, preparing them for work, higher education, or an apprenticeship. And what is different again is the fact that the T level content is aligned to the corresponding apprenticeship standard, ensuring that the skills and knowledge taught are relevant to the industry, to that particular industry. So what is the aim of T levels? Well, the primary purpose of a T level is to prepare learners for entry into skilled employment and to facilitate progression to higher levels of technical education. Now, I'm going to move on from this slide because unless Kerry, I don't know whether you can hear me, would like to talk to this slide.
Ali, can you hear me now?
I can. Yes, you're quite sort of quiet, but I can still hear you.
Okay. Do you want me to carry on? Can you hear me enough?
Please, Kerry. Yes,
amazing,
please.
Amazing. I'm so sorry, and thank you, Bob and Karen and June, for letting me know that you could hear Ali. That was really helpful. Technology at its best. So I will carry on because I'm sure that we might have held you up at the start. So apologies for that, but thank you, Ali, for cracking on and that positioning. So just in terms of why City and Guilds are different. So we are now, it was our 144th birthday this year, of being a kind of a leading skills development organisation. We've worked through kind of plenty of reform and change, and adapted our support in the education landscape with our customers and the learners at the heart of that. So really what I'm saying there is that you are in a kind of trusted pair of hands with the experience that we've got in that space. And then secondly, we are the only awarding organisation with the registered charity status, as well as the Royal Charter Institute being recognised by that, which demonstrates the impact really that our heritage and the importance that our global skills development reach has, both across the UK and internationally. So the third point, we have an established portfolio of learning programmes. They build competency, but they also offer flexible pathways that support lifelong learning and indeed employability. And we run right the way across the levels, so entry level right the way through up into the level 7s and 8s, and across a range of sectors and funding pathways. So again, a really significant portfolio, but again with lots of experience and technical expertise within the organisation. And then in terms of the kind of the fourth point there, from a giving back, if you like, our social projects enable us to give back to the sector and to the industry, and that's done through our City and Guilds Foundation. We've got a range of really successful activities, including our bursary programme, which has been running for years now, and actually looks to provide financial help and support towards individuals that in need, to make a difference to their lives and getting them the kind of skills development into meaningful employment. So helping them along their journey in life. But also on from that, another element of the foundation is our Princess Royal Training Awards, and a really nice celebration last week. But this programme enables us to recognise excellence and celebrate success. So we're not just a kind of an awarding organisation or an EPAO. We do give back to the sector. And then the final kind of point on this slide is to finish with the statistic. We've got 5 million learners all working on a City and Guilds qualification this year. So again, just making an impact to all of those people's lives. Okay, so just moving on, Ali, to the next slide. So this really is, Ali's spoken to the background of T levels and the kind of the drive behind the change. And I'm going to mention now some of the impact for providers, which I'm sure that some, if not all of you, are aware of. But the Skills Act is now law and will look to improve and has started to improve indeed post-16 provision. And some of the impacts that you're going to see, well, are already starting, as I mentioned before, but in England since 2020, some level 3 qualifications have been defunded. And again, we're seeing that kind of the list of those increase year on year. And that for some centres and providers is making curriculum planning quite difficult as we move through this transition into T levels. The government vision, and again to echo kind of what Ali has already said, is to have 3 clear pathways for the 16 to 18 main education, mainstream education. So A level, T level, and apprenticeships. Whilst there's going to be some opportunity to develop some smaller occupational technical qualifications that could be delivered alongside an A level, they are going to be very kind of few and far between and to the exception rather than the rule. Now, it goes without saying that the impact of this transition is going to impact recruitment. We've seen this happen before when new programs are introduced, but it's just allowing the kind of things to settle and us to embed these new programs. On from that, we will see some kind of impact around that HE progression, particularly across some subject areas, and that we really are, as an awarding organisation, doing our supporting that by engaging with the HEI establishments so that they recognise our T levels, so that they understand them. And that's not just about the UCAS points that they attract, but that's on from making sure the admissions officers are aware of the content, etc. And Ali does a really, and has done this with technical qualifications, in fact, has that engagement piece, and that again will help really build that momentum and understanding of a T level in that HEI space. And I think we're aware, but with that move towards that external assessment model, we've seen that already in play with our technical qualifications. And indeed, if you look to the apprenticeship space, that again, EPA, it's that external and on the end. So it's not a massively different model, although it might be for certain subject areas, but it's certainly a streamlined approach. And then finally, again, I suppose it goes without saying with what I've said at point 1 with this, but with reference to the large academic qualifications, we will see the funding being switched off those where there is a T level competing in that same subject area. And I think that is already in play, and we're starting to see the impact of that. So now I'm going to hand you back to Ali, who's going to unpick that T level in a little bit more detail for you. Thank you, Ali.
Thanks, Kerry. So the first question I'd always want to know is, how do T levels compare to other qualifications? And, I'm not going to read the slide out. The idea is that we unpick this slide a little bit so it's a little bit clearer for everybody. So what are the intended choices? Now, we already know that T levels are 2-year, high quality programme choice, and they follow GCSEs. And the intention is that T levels will become one of the main choices for learners after GCSEs, alongside apprenticeships and A levels. So if we break this down, at age 16, young people will be able to choose either an academic option or a technical option, which includes an apprenticeship. So for students wishing to pursue an academic route and have the intention of progression to academic studies at a higher education provider, they would normally choose to follow an A-level route in a school or a college, and they would continue to study in that classroom-based environment. Now, for students who want to move directly into a paid training role, where they study a particular trade or profession, they would normally choose an apprenticeship route, as they've already decided the occupation that they want. They will spend 80% on the job learning their trade and 20% in the classroom learning the underpinning knowledge of that trade. So students who choose to study a T level would spend typically 80% in a college or provider setting and 20% in an industry placement. But what isn't known, or sometimes is a bit confusing, the 80% that is based in a college or provider setting includes between 50 and 80% of that time actually learning the practical skills in their chosen occupational specialism. So it's certainly not all classroom-based training. So students would normally know which type of industry area that they wish to study, but they wouldn't necessarily know the actual specialism that they want to do. So they would study the breadth and the common core of that particular industry and then study their specialism in year 2, which allows them time to decide, is that pathway right for them? Now, T levels, we've heard about them having the advantage of being allocated UCAS points, equivalent in size to 3A levels. Obviously, that depends on which grade the learners achieve. But in some cases, learners may choose to continue to a higher apprenticeship or an accelerated apprenticeship in a suitable or relevant occupational area. And this does provide additional choices for T levels, and those learners can choose to go into employment or higher level technical studies. So they're not funneled down one particular pathway. Now, this slide is showing all 11 of the T level routes and the T levels available. So each of the routes you can see has a number of pathways within it. So there are 24 different pathways within the 11 T level routes. Now, the ones indicated in red are the T levels or the pathways that City and Guilds have been awarded. Now, the main difference with T levels is they are awarded to only one awarding organisation following a robust procurement process, where the winning organisation is given the sole rights to develop the technical qualification within the T level for a 5-year period. Now, the intellectual property of that T level remains with the Institute for Apprenticeships and Technical Education and not the awarding organisation. So what this means for providers is they can't choose which awarding organisation they want for a particular T level or a T level pathway, as a sole awarding organisation will be responsible for each route or pathway within that route. So I know it sounds very confusing, but hopefully that's made sense of how that looks. Now, you may have all seen this slide before, as it provides an overarching view of the T level programme, but I will quickly run through it for the benefit of people who may not have this unpicked a bit. So a T level itself is not a qualification. It is a level 3 programme of study, which is made up of several different components. Now, the total size of the T level programme is up to 1,800 guiding learning hours and is designed to be studied full-time over 2 years. Now, within the T level is a technical qualification, sometimes referred to as the TQ, which is made up of a core component and an occupational specialism. Within the boxes that you can see here, shown in blue, is a breakdown of the technical qualification. And this is the part of the T level that the awarding organisations, as in City and Guilds, are responsible for developing as a result of winning the T level bid. Now, the core component is between 20 and 50% of the TQ, and it focuses on the concepts, theories, transferable and core skills that are shared across each of the routes that we showed you before on the previous slides. So just to break that down a bit more, for example, in business, it would concentrate on quality compliance, maybe project or change management, whereas in engineering, it would be the science, the maths and engineering principles would all belong in the core. The core is assessed by an externally set and externally marked exam consisting of 2 different papers and an employer set project. The employer set project is set and developed by the awarding organisation, in this case City and Guilds, and it's in conjunction with our employer boards. This is graded A star to E, similar to an A-level grading, and again it is externally set and externally marked. Now, the word equivalent to A-levels tends to be used quite extensively, and I tend to use the following explanation when explaining what is meant by equivalency. The size and rigour of a T-level programme is comparable to 3 A-level to a 3 A-level size programme. Therefore, T-levels attract UCAS points in line with those allocated to 3 A-levels. And the alignment is based on a notional comparison of standards with A-levels and other level 3 qualifications. Now that's how it's been graded and how it's been decided that it's a 3 A-level in size. Now the occupational specialism, as we said before, is at least half, if not more, of the technical qualification. And that is based on the apprenticeship occupational maps. And it is practically assessed by a synoptic assignment, similar to technicals, and it assesses the breadth of the occupational specialism, and that is graded as a pass, a merit, or a distinction. This is provided by City and Guilds, and depending on which T level, it's internally marked and externally moderated by us. But in the case of management and administration pathway, the occupational specialism is externally marked by us as well, rather than internally marked. Now, outside of the TQ, you can see the other components in a sort of lavender colour. An industry placement must be completed, which must be no less than 45 days in total across the T-level programme. Learners must continue to study maths and English as a condition of funding if they have not already achieved a GCSE, currently grade 4 or above, or functional skills at level 2. There will also be general competencies, including digital competencies integrated into the TQ where necessary to achieve competence within that area. And of course, as in all programmes of study, there will be tutorials and opportunities for employability, enrichment and pastoral activities. So with a bit of luck, I'm now going to hand you back to Kerry, who's going to take you through the funding and approval timelines.
Great, thank you, Ali. Just another sound check from my side. You can hear me okay again?
Yeah, quite low, but I can still hear.
Okay, I'll try and speak up a little bit. Okay, so from a T-level and the funding perspective, so part of the rollout plan from the Department for Education, we know that these kind of T-levels have gone in waves. So we're now for September 2023, we will be on wave 4. And so there is some eligibility required for you to become a provider and deliver these programs. And that is that you would be already delivering the kind of the 16 to 19 study programs. That will enable you for September 23 to be delivering T-levels that were introduced in 20 and 2021. And that does require that you've got an Ofsted grade of good or outstanding. And then moving then from 2024. So for those of you that are looking that far ahead and that is in your plans for 2024, you must register your interest for approval with the Department for Education and ESFA by the 24th of March. So if you can just click on the link on this slide, that will enable you to do that. So from 2024, we will see that eligibility widen out as we're in our final kind of year of the 5th year of rollout. So again, please click on the links. There's further guidance from a funding perspective included in this slide. And on the right-hand side of this screen, we look at the bands, and it just gives you a flavour of an overview of how the funding bands are allocated. So unsurprisingly, the band is decided by the planned hours of delivery and then the funding allocated in accordance with the hours being delivered. So probably no real shock there for from what you're kind of currently, the funding rules that you're currently working to. And just from a kind of bringing back to the approval side of things, so as Ali's already mentioned, these qualifications are owned by the Institute. So there are those additional layers of approval elements required. So before we can start onboarding you from a awarding organisation perspective and start walking you in through our approval process, we are required to check that Department for Education and ESFA approval first. So if you're brand new to this but already delivering those 16 to 19 study programmes, I'm sure you'll be familiar, but the links on this slide are really aimed for you. And then if we walk through then our approval process, if we can move to the next slide, please, Ali. Amazing. Okay, so as part of the kind of T level requirements, we are in that academic timeline. So for the approval process, unsurprisingly, there is a clear timeline that we are working to, and indeed a whole layer and wrapper of support around that timeline too. So to kind of start at the top of the slide, the approval activity, the window for you to register with City and Guilds opens in February, and that's where we'll start to make the approval forms available. The approval runs right the way through until August, and that essentially is to allow enough time for you to submit your approval submissions and applications, and then for us to work with our technical quality associates through and support you through that approval process. So that runs from March through until August. But what's important to point out here is that, as I say, when the window opens on the 27th of February, there is a technical qualification full provider approval form that would need to be required, and that's regardless of whether you're a City and Guilds approved centre or not. So those forms go live from the 27th of February, and then from the 1st of March, our enhanced support window opens. So that essentially is that opportunity to have access to both our quality teams, but also our technical quality assurers to talk you through every aspect of that approval process, and indeed all of the requirements that fit within that. So anything from delivery plans to resources, all of that detail we are able to support pre-approval so that you have got everything that you need ahead of putting that submission through. And then once you've placed the approval through, as I've said, that's where we will work with our technical quality associates through the approval process. For many of the sectors that we're working on the T levels for, there will be the requirement of a visit, an approval visit, but that's very much to enable support as well as run through the approval process too. That then is managed and approved by our quality team. So the TQA will submit their approval report, and our quality team then will confirm the approval, make the decision on the approval and confirm the approval. But it doesn't end there. So once we've kind of confirmed that approval, we continue that support through our post-approval stroke delivery, once you're moving into that delivery. And actually to, again, unpick that a lot more, Ali's going to talk you through the raft of support that we've got available in support of these T levels. So back to you, Ali, thank you.
Thanks, Kerry. So just looking at this slide here, there are so many fee-free resources available to support your delivery. So rather than list them all, I've put some links on this slide showing where you can access all of the relevant resources for your sector. The first link that you can see on underneath the support and resources heading, this will take you to the City and Guilds T-level landing page, where all of the resources and support materials are. The second link is to a very short video navigating our website to show you where all of the specifications and the sample assessments are for your sector. And the final link is to the T-level events page, where you can register for events or access any past sector-specific webinars or events recordings. Now, in the screen grab below, you'll find there is a tab hyperlinked to each specific sector, and that's where you can gain all access to book onto these events for that sector, because obviously, you know, you might not want them all. There might be a very specific sector that you're looking to deliver. And on the right-hand side of the slide, you can see another screen grab showing each of the content tabs that sit under the Resources and Support Hub banner. And at the very bottom of the slide is the contact details for the technicals quality team and the centre support team. So I thought it was much easier to put the links in than to run through a raft of different resources. So as Kerry said before, you know, for centres thinking of offering T levels and want to start preparation for delivery, we have a calendar and a 12-month pre-delivery plan to support you. Now, this is available for every sector, and it covers the support available in the academic year prior to delivering a T level. Now, once, obviously, I'm going to leave on that slide for a minute, but once centres start to deliver, there is also a very similar support, which is called in delivery year support plan. And that then takes you through a whole different set of events, webinars, activities to support teaching of T levels, things like preparation for exam, prep, ESP breakdown of the tasks, how to approach the occupational specialism, and all of this support is provided at no cost to centres. So just looking at that, you can see, I think this is an example of the business and administration pre-delivery countdown. So it just takes you through where everything is. There are links to everything on that, when you need to book in, when your exam timetables are going to be published, critical events that are really, important that you attend because it's got really important information in. So that's what it looks like for every single sector. Now, we're moving on to almost the last slide now, and I appreciate there's been huge amounts of information shared today. But as this slide, I think it's worth sharing because as T levels remain the intellectual property of the institute and the government, there are a lot of different organisations involved in supporting centres, from professional development with toolkits, support with components that sit outside of the awarding organisation's technical qualification. And you'll probably be aware of all of these organisations who we also work very closely with. But I thought it might just help to give an overview of what each of their roles are in relation to T levels for your organisation. So the Education and Training Foundation, or ETF as it's abbreviated, they provide a wealth of professional development support for teaching staff, and they have a raft of available resources, including a full fee-free CPD offer for teaching staff wanting to sort of upskill, and this includes sort of occupational areas of upskilling as well. And I've put some links into there to the video, to one of their videos, and that explains their offer and support, and it also tells you how you can access that as well. So it's really, really fantastic support that they offer. The Institute, or IFATE, I think we touched on it before, are responsible for the TQ, the technical qualification, and that's the main classroom-based element of the T level and the procurement and management of the TQs, as we said before. So that's the role of IFATE. They own the intellectual property as well. The industry placements are run by the Department for Education, and they provide all of the information, toolkits and support to centres. Again, I've put a link there for you to access that. And the relationship with providers, schools, colleges, etc., sits with the Education and Skills Funding Agency, the ESFA and the DFE. And of course, accreditation and regulation of the qualification will sit with Ofqual. So I've put links into everything there so you can find out more information should you wish to. Now, this is the final slide really, and it's the information and links to show you the next steps. And I've kept it deliberately very simple because that's been a huge amount of information shared today. So to ensure that you now receive any updates and any T level information, there's a link to an online contact form. So my first advice would be to complete that, and at least then you can tailor what information gets sent to you and who has access to that. And I think if you have any technical sector specific questions. In other words, you know, it's very sector related. I've put under there a link to the technical advisors. Now, these are all subject specialists within their area, and I've put a link to all of their specific sectors and who they are and how you can contact them. So they're the people for any sector qualification sort of very specific questions. And the final link is to the technicals quality team, and they will advise you on almost everything: how to register for delivering T levels, any questions you have over quality, and they are a massive support for our T levels. And I've given you this link here. Now, for the last thing I'm going to do before we bring Kerry in and we have a look at some of the question and answers is we'd like to thank you so much for bearing with us and for your time today.